This aircraft was one of the main contenders in the American Very Long Range Bomber project, and it was a very ambitious design. But constant problems and delays hampered its development, and as a result, in the end, only a bit more than 100 units were delivered, and the type entered service so late it only participated in a few combat missions before World War II ended. So let's see the history of the Consolidated B-32 Dominator. The American heavy bombers of World War II are well known for most people. The B-17 and B-24 were built in huge numbers, and were used in most theaters of the war against the Axis forces. But even before the beginning of the war, the US Army Air Corps already worked on the next step. During the 1930s, there were several attempts to see the viability of the so-called very long-range bombers, or super heavy bombers, with around 5,000 miles of range. These attempts created designs like the Boeing XB-15 in 1937, and a few years later the Douglas XB-19, which was the biggest military aircraft of the world at that time, and only the B-36 Convair was able to take this title later. I have already made a video on the XB-19, so if you're interested in the history of that bomber, check it out. These prototypes didn't produce actually combat-ready bombers though, largely because of the immense speed how aviation technology advanced during the late 1930s. By 1939, when the war broke out in Europe, the Very Long Range project was restarted again, mostly thanks to General Henry H. Arnold. In January 1940, the War Department issued new, very ambitious specifications for a new super heavy bomber, which would need to be able to carry 20,000 pounds of bombs, have a range of 5,000 miles, and a top speed of 400 miles an hour. 4 manufacturers entered their designs for the specifications. Boeing with their Model 345, which later became the B-29, Consolidated with their Model 33, this later became the B-32 Dominator, Lockheed with their XB-30 design, and Douglas with the XB-31. Lockheed and Douglas soon dropped out from the competition, and Boeing received a contract to build prototypes in August 1940, under the designation XB-29. Consolidated also kept working on their design, as it was promising to, and the Air Corps wanted to keep it as a backup in case the Boeing design fails. They received an order to build 3 prototypes in September 1940. The Consolidated design initially looked like an evolution of the B-24, featuring dual-tail design, roll-up bomb bay doors, Davis wing, and tricycle landing gear. But there were plenty of differences between the two bombers. The new B-32 had a cylindrical fuselage, almost 17 feet longer than the B-24, and its wingspan was 25 feet wider. It was also designed to use remote-controlled turrets and pressurized crew compartment, similarly to the B-29. With the increase in size and planned modern equipment, the weight of the plane increased as well, to almost 65,000 pounds empty, and with a maximum takeoff weight of 113,500 pounds, almost double of the B-24's weight. The mock-ups of the new bomber were ready early 1941 and were inspected by the Army. Soon they were approved, and an order for 13 YB-32 pre-production model was placed, in addition to the already ordered 3 XB-32 models. The first prototype rolled off the assembly line in September 1942, a few months behind schedule. This delay was caused mainly because problems with the complicated remote turrets and the pressurization of the aircraft, both which followed the development all the way. By this time the Army was in a hurry and requested to start the test flights anyways, with a stripped-down model missing the pressurization equipment and weaponry. The first prototype made its maiden flight on 7th of September 1942, and immediately problems were found with the aircraft. With the original dual-tail it was unstable, and as the test flights continued, the list of the malfunctions and problems became longer and longer. The earlier ordered 13 YB-32 models were cancelled in February 1943, although a month later a contract was signed for 300 production planes. The Army became more and more concerned about the development of the new bomber, but since the B-29 had its own problems, they couldn't afford to cancel the Consolidated project. Both planes used the Wright R-3350 engines, and both suffered from similar engine overheating problems as well. The crash of the first B-32 prototype in May 1943 just raised even more concerns about the consolidated design, and it took months to finish the second prototype, so the test flights only continued in July. The delays meant even though the XB-32 prototype was finished first, the Boeing XB-29 development caught up to it soon. The Army inspection on the second prototype in November found the defensive armament not up to the task, as it had many blind spots and its firepower and ammo supply were insufficient. A second inspection in December 1943 found a lot more shortcomings and recommended a list of changes. A single vertical tail to improve stability, delete pressurization as it was too problematic and not needed, change the remote control turrets to manned ones, installation of wing de-icers, new engine nacelle designs because of the constant overheating and oil buildup, same as on the B-29, the use of new four-bladed propellers, improving the fuel system, improved bomb sight, standardization of parts for easier maintenance, and many more. While the second prototype continued the test flights, the third XB-32 was built incorporating the recommended changes. It still performed its first flights with the original twin tail, but soon it was modified with a 16.5 foot tall B-29 style tail. This modification still proved to be inadequate, so a 19.5 foot tall new tail was designed by Consolidated, which became the definitive production one. This variant had the pressurization system deleted altogether, and various man turrets were tested to replace the originally planned remote-controlled ones. The Army Air Force originally wanted to deploy the B-32 by summer 1944, and start converting several B-24 groups to the new bomber as soon as it completed service tests. But by spring 1944 it was clear this plan won't work, because of the delays in the new bomber's development. The Army intended to use 10 production aircraft for the service test, to speed up the process for the required 200 hours of flight time. But the problems and delays continued. The first delivered unit was immediately wrecked when its nose gear collapsed, and problems with the production slowed down the delivery of the following planes. Consolidated only managed to deliver 5 of the new bombers by December 1944, and the program was on the verge of cancellation. By this time its rival, the B-29, was already delivered in numbers and started flying missions from China and India. If you're interested in the history of the B-29 and the atomic bombs, I have already made a video on those, check it out. The Air Force started an investigation on the project to determine if it should be cancelled or not. In December 1944, General Donald Wilson finished his report, which pointed out that while the new plane had numerous problems, the real potential of it cannot be determined before the service test program is finished. It also recommended to start the crew training immediately, instead of waiting for the final decision. The slow production, however, further delayed the testing, and the deadline had to be extended, but slowly the production B-32 started to arrive to the Army Air Force. However, the testing revealed again new problems, with the instruments and controls, very high noise levels, and again problems with the engine nacelles, similarly to the B-29s, which also had problems with the Wright 3350 engines. But the problems were slowly worked out on the arriving models, and the definitive production B-32 took shape. So let's take a look at the technical specifications of the production model. The B-32 Dominator was 83 feet 1 inches long, with a wingspan of 135 feet. It had an empty weight of 60,278 pounds, and a maximum takeoff weight of 123,250 pounds. It used the same Wright R3350 engines as the B-29, each of them producing 2,200 horsepower. The plane could reach a maximum speed of 357 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 290 miles an hour. It had a combat range of 3,800 miles and a service ceiling of 30,700 feet. The bomber's defensive armament consisted of 10 50 caliber machine guns in 5 turrets, and it could carry a bomb load of 20,000 pounds. The B-32 Dominator's long and troublesome development resulted in a late arrival in the war, and as it turned out, in the end the new bomber had a longer development time than actual service life. By the time its problems were worked out, the Air Force was not actually in a need for another heavy bomber, as the B-29, despite its own problems, proved itself already. They probably wouldn't have seen combat in World War II if not for General George Kenney, who initially requested B-29 heavy bombers for his forces on the South Pacific. His request was denied, however, as the limited number of B-29s were assigned for strategic bombing duties. But when he requested to field test the B-32 bombers, he got the permission for that. The first B-32s arrived to the Philippines in May 1945, and they started flying their test missions at the end of the month. Their first mission took place on 29th of May, bombing a Japanese supply depot, followed by a bombing raid on a sugar mill on Formosa on 15th of June. A week later, on the 22nd, they bombed an alcohol plant, and their last test mission took place on the 25th of June, attacking bridges on Formosa again. By July 1945, the 386 Bomb Squadron transitioned to the new bombers. In August, they moved to Okinawa and started flying reconnaissance missions over Japan. Though the Japanese surrender happened on 15th of August, the documents were only signed on the 2nd of September. The B-32s continued their reconnaissance missions to monitor how the Japanese comply with the ceasefire, but they were attacked by enemy fighters several times. On 17th of August, 2 B-32s were attacked by Japanese planes, and both suffered light damage. Luckily, both of them managed to return to their base with no casualties. A day later, 2 other bombers were less fortunate, as they came under attack by 17 Japanese fighters. A strange misunderstanding from both sides really, as the American planes flew reconnaissance missions to make sure the Japanese will hold their side of the ceasefire, while the Japanese pilots attacked them because they feared they will drop bombs despite the ceasefire. In the engagement, one Dominator was lightly damaged, but the other one, flying at lower altitude, took the brunt of the Japanese attack. Many of its crew members were wounded, and assistant photographer Anthony Marchone lost his life, and became the last US Army Air Force member who died in World War II. After this incident, the US demanded that the Japanese remove the propellers from all remaining aircraft. The B-32s flew their last photo reconnaissance mission over Japan on 28th of August. As the war ended, the production of the B-32s were cancelled in September, and many finished planes were flown from the manufacturing plant directly to be scrapped. Though initially 1,200 B-32s were ordered, but the slow production, numerous problems to fix, and the success of the B-29 meant only 130 of them were built before the end of the war. The plane that was planned as a backup in case the B-29 project fails itself became the problem child, and took so long to get in service it almost missed the war entirely. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.